and to be able to gracefully let go of the identifications from the past that have held you in an inadequate relationship to reality, without feeling guilt, without feeling disloyal to parents or traditions or whatever, by putting it into an ever larger context in which all is included. It's not this or that, it's not an either or, but it's a realization in the same way that Einstein could put Newton's laws within a higher context of relativity, and that within a higher context of quantum physics. We are gaining larger and larger contexts in which to contain our understanding of reality. But we also need to have the psychic strength and courage and capacity for attention to hold that psychic energy and to channel it toward healing, toward love, toward the generosity of being that is required to build a healthy community structure. So when one has the internal structure, then one can begin to build a larger communal structure, and then gradually a world structure, a cosmic structure, that is all being downloaded from the source of all structure, of all intelligence, of all wisdom and love. And that source, because that source is one in all of us, we can resonate with and recognize, this is the truth. So it's not the question that everybody starts with when they come here, like, does this guy know anything, or is this all a fake, or is he pretending to know something? It has nothing to do with a judgment of me versus another. It has to do with your own resonance with the truth that is internal to you, that is being touched by words that are not coming from an individual, but coming from a source that is universal, and therefore opens our own hearts from within, not from somebody battering at them from without. That will never work. If someone tries to convince you and convert you to some other system of belief, it's pointless. The more someone tries, the more you'll fight it. And irresistible force will meet immovable object, and goodbye, and nothing was gained. And we're so used to that to somebody wanting to knock on the door to take something from us, to sell us something, to exploit us in some way, rather than to recognize the divine self that is in each of us, that wants to come out, but has already given up hope that it could ever be seen, it could ever be known, it could ever be appreciated, that we've locked ourselves in. And we've become hermits, no matter how social our lives might be. And usually the more social contacts we have, the more hermetic we actually are, sealed ultimately within an internal bubble that refuses to let itself be known or even to know itself. We remain strangers to ourselves at the deepest level. And we live at an outside shell level of ourselves, of our being. And we settle for that because everybody else is settling for that. And we assume that's just the way it's done, and maybe in the next life I'll go for living a true, authentic existence. But now I'm just going to raise my kids and go on making money at this job I hate, and maybe on my deathbed I'll ask God for liberation. But of course it's too late at that point. And so here's an opportunity and an oasis in which we can get beyond all of those ego narratives and social demands out there that tell you this is not worth doing, or this is too dangerous, or this will threaten your house of cards, or it will make your family hate you and throw you out of the house, or whatever it is that the superego tells you to justify not going any deeper in the journey, which ultimately comes to a failure of nerve, of realizing that you are and have been a stranger to yourself. You don't know your own potential. You don't know what's even in the deepest place of your own heart. But that behind the psychic level, behind the level of being a person of whatever kind, whether you're confessing your lack of knowing and of being or denying that lack, but behind all of that, there is an essence of our being that cannot even be called subjective. Because the word subject, has these two meanings. It's not only that, this comes from a me that is separate, but it means that you are subject to someone else. And the ego is subjected to the other, in the same way that if you come from England, you're a subject of the Queen. You're subordinate. And every ego is subordinate to this superego voice with its own demands, with its own shoulds and oughts. And you have to do this, or you're a failure, a loser, or nothing. And these kinds of demands rule our lives, and we falsely assume that this is our own thought, but it's not. It's a mind that has been colonized by not only the parents, but the collective unconscious. From the lies that the media tell us, if you happen to make the mistake of watching television, or going to movies, you will be bombarded by false messages. And the same thing in the school system. We all know that. And yet at the same time, despite knowing it, we haven't removed that indoctrination. It still affects us. It still orders us. And we go around saying, oh, I know better, but, I'm still going to do this. Live this kind of life that is not true to my own spirit. And so when we have the courage to break with that, internally, not only externally, not only geographically remove ourselves from, let's say, the biological family, but internally, psychologically distance ourselves from any identity that we were handed to discover, who am I? Who was I before I was born? Before I had this body? Before I identified with this gender? Before I identified even as a human being? Is there an essence that transcends all of that? That is one with the cosmic intelligence. It's until we find that ultimate root and source of our being, we won't be satisfied. The search will have to continue. But it becomes more beautiful, more blissful, more extraordinary and fascinating and delightful the further we go on that journey and leave behind the laws of suffering that the ego mandates for our lives, until we regain the ultimate freedom that is God consciousness, that is liberation. And there's no need to postpone that journey. There's no reason to delay it, because that's our real purpose as human beings. That's what separates the human spirit from any other kind of animal creature on this planet. That we are free of instincts and we are free of external compulsion. And there is an internal desire, the deepest urge of our being, to reach liberation, to reach truth, and to reach the capacity for unconditional universal love. And nothing less will bring us fulfillment. And that's when our creative supplies will be realized as infinite. We won't be hoarding a little capacity to create and won't fear that it'll run out, because we are simply the vessels of an infinite flow that transcends the individual. And so your artistry will become ever more beautiful, and your capacity to offer compassion and wisdom and healing and help becomes ever greater the less you need it for yourself, and the less you need to prove anything either to others or yourself, and the less you are freed from duality, and the more you realize that we are all one. And in that oneness there is only love, there is nothing else, there are no conflicts. And so when the internal conflicts have been dissolved, then the external ones also, which are projections of the internal, will fall away. And then we will know the truth at each moment of what is the accurate behavior. Not by thinking it out, not by premeditating it, but by being in the meditative state that is at one with the actual force field that this world is. We don't realize it, but the space that we are in is curved. It has its own forces that guide us in certain directions. We don't determine it, just as the earth doesn't determine that it's going to revolve around the sun or the moon around the earth. These are determined by the contours of space. And in the same way, our lives are lived in a psychic space that is curved toward reaching that ultimate center and source of our being that we're orbiting around. And the sooner that we give ourselves to that space and don't resist it, then the power of the attraction of the soul to the Supreme Being will bring about a union that is imperishable, and that will bring the ultimate bliss and joy into our lives. And so I hope you will all give yourself permission, as the moth ultimately must, to dive into the flame and realize you all the time have been the flame. And let the flame shine.